your life is almost like a speaker, like think about like an audio speaker, like a Bluetooth speaker, and it's like that speaker plays music, right? But it's only going to play based on the quality of what you connect to it or plug into it, So like if you plug in, some outdated, Walkman, some old, crappy piece of technology, you plug it into that speaker, like the audio quality is going to represent what's being plugged into it. So if we think of ourselves and our lives and our physical body and our, mental health as this speaker, you kind of have to question, like, what am I plugging into it?
Welcome to the Evolved Podcast, an open forum on personal growth and cultivating a positive mindset. I'm your host, Joe Fitzpatrick. Today on the show, we have my friend, Myke Metzger. Myke was born in Long Island, New York, and he is currently based in Richmond, Virginia. Myke is an author, a professional speaker, and entrepreneur. He is best known for his success as the CEO of Stoqd, spelled Stoqd, a top 100 ranked US marketing and branding agency. He is a digital marketing consultant for some of the most successful companies, professional athletes, and public figures in America. In 2018, Myke self-published his book, Credibility Method, the simple method to establishing your credibility and increasing your legitimacy in your industry or career. This book is for entrepreneurs or career starters looking to pump up their legitimacy, improve their resume, impress their audience or boss, and gain massive credibility by improving their outward presence in a professional manner to help them become an authority in their industry. Myke is someone I've known for a long time, and we recently connected again over our love for bikes. And I am so stoked that we got to have this conversation because we tackle so much from entrepreneurship and marketing to self-care and nutrition and physical activity. So a lot of good information here. Let's go. Myke, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's great to see you.
Yeah, likewise, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So before we get started, can you just give a brief introduction on who you are, what you do for a living, and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm 33. I live here in Richmond, Virginia, but I'm originally from Long Island. I am a CEO of two different companies. I run a marketing company and a mixed martial arts media company where we cover the sport of MMA. But primarily what I do is marketing. Everything that I do revolves around marketing. And so I run an agency. We focus on building websites, running social media for businesses, and also doing content creation for businesses. Mostly small and medium businesses, anything from doctors, lawyers, dog treat companies, cannabis companies, like extreme sports and fitness athletes, things like that. But we've worked with much bigger brands as well, like Dairy Queen and Long and Foster and things like that as well. So everything I do revolves around marketing, and that is my passion. I love business, business development, marketing, promotions, anything that can drive people's vision and products further.
Right. And your marketing agency is called Stoqd.
Yes.
Stoqd.
Yep.
And your MMA agency is called Ballers. Is that
Brawlers?
Correct?
Yeah, it's called Brawlers. So, like we're in a brawl.
Right. I love it. And how long have you been doing those companies for?
So I got started in marketing probably about a little over 8 years now. In a weird way, it's always been a part of my life.
Right.
But I didn't really recognize what I was doing until I was about 24, which I'm sure we'll dive into. But Stoqd used to be under a different name, and we used to be called RVA Social. And as we grew and as my client list grew, I started to realize that what I was doing was much more than just like a local business. And as the agency grew, in the back of my mind, I always thought that I needed to change the name. I was never really completely happy with the name RVA Social. And I knew at some point it would have to change. And so what I ended up doing was just kind of putting that on the back burner and never really like pulling the trigger to make the change. And then of course, COVID happened. And, you know, plenty of inconveniences that come along with that. But the one thing that was convenient was that it gave me the breathing room and the opportunity to finally like completely rebrand and change the name, change the colors, pretty much everything that went along with the brand itself. And so that was when I took the opportunity to rebrand from RVA Social to the name Stoqd Marketing. We launched a new website, all new, you know, branding guidelines and colors and all that type of stuff, which was really cool. So that worked out really well.
Right.
Brawlers has been around since actually like January 1st of 2020. So almost around that same exact time. I did not start Brawlers. I came on as the CEO and majority owner right in the beginning of 2020. So that was already an existing company that I came on board and kind of took over the steering of the vision for the business side of things.
And who's your business partner for Brawlers?
Yes, his name is Dylan. He lives in New York, Dylan Cope.
Is he the founder of that business?
So he actually acquired it from a different person. So, and I'm not even sure the name of the person who started it, you know, but it started as just an Instagram page, you know, just kind of a fan page. And then Dylan took it and ran with it and, you know, kind of started to turn it into much more of an actual business. And that was when he reached out to me. You know, I started as just a fan of the page. You know, I just followed it because I follow the sport very closely. You know, I've been a fan of mixed martial arts and the sport of wrestling and jujitsu my entire life. And so I was just literally a follower of the page and just enjoyed the content that they put out. And one of the benefits of being verified on social media is when you comment on things, your comment always pops right to the top.
Right.
So over time, Dylan started to notice that I would comment on the page and stuff. And he reached out and we just kind of made a connection, made a friendship. And he brought up the idea of me kind of partnering up with him to run the business. And so when I came on board, we got much more heavily into affiliate marketing and then launched a new website. Then we partnered with ESPN and UFC and the fighters and just kind of grew it from there, and it started to blow up.
It's incredible. How did you get started doing marketing? Like, let's go back.
Yeah.
Where did it all begin?
So as I mentioned a minute ago, in a weird way, it was something that I had always done, but I didn't really catch on to what I was doing.
Right.
And what I mean by that is in high school, and coincidentally enough, I was just telling this story last night, but in high school, I didn't take your normal classes. You know, I didn't take a language class and I didn't take, you know, like workshop like everybody else. I was always much more interested in the creative classes like art and photography and graphic design and computer programming. So there was always sort of this combination of like art and technology in my life, even prior to high school. You know, I'm lucky, and I'm sure maybe you feel this way as well, to be at like the perfect age where technology and social media was introduced into, you know, my life in, you know, like early high school. And those things aligned conveniently with what I was just naturally interested in, which was mostly the world of creativity. You know, I love music, I love art, I love design, and that like radiates throughout my whole life. And it's why we're able to build beautiful websites and social media content. But how this started was probably in 11th grade. My friends and just, you know, friends that I had that were in bands and played music and were going to the local shows and stuff started to rely on me to do like their t-shirt designs and their album cover design. And then that evolved into like designing their MySpace layouts and things like that.
Yeah.
And even then slowly as Facebook started to blow up, creating their Facebook, you know, header images and things like that. But I never thought of that.
I just want to pause real quick.
Yeah, please.
If you don't mind. You know, I just want to try and put that into perspective. Like, so you were studying some graphic design classes in school. You're just studying some computer coding classes, and you know, you took a personal interest in that. Your friends you told your friends that you were taking those classes, and they asked you, to help their band out with that. Like, how did you end up like making those connections that you could use those skills to, help out your friends' bands, and like, get the word out more that you were interested in doing that type of stuff?
Yeah, so good question. The funny thing is I never thought of it that way. Like I never thought of I didn't think of it the same way as I do today, which is, business and generating leads and selling services,
Right.
I never was ever taught that I could be successful or make money or run a business or be, an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I just did it because I liked it and I was going to these shows anyway. So it wasn't really making connections. It was just, I was already going to these shows and, was acquaintances with all these people, people that didn't go to my school, people that were maybe older than me and just in bands. And I just happened to be there. And it was just, the most authentic version of word of mouth that you could imagine. It's like somebody's in a band. These bands play with other bands, on their set, throughout the night. And if somebody liked the artwork from their t-shirt or their album cover, I guess they'd probably ask, oh, who did your album cover? Who set up your MySpace or whatever? And they'd point to me, and somebody reach out to me on MySpace or, whatever, shoot me a message or a phone call or something. And this is the thing, is like, I don't even really remember, like, it wasn't something I was really trying to pursue. Like I would charge a couple $100 to do these things, if that, probably.
Yeah.
And I never thought of it as a way of making a living. As soon as I graduated high school or got close to graduating high school, my first impression was that I needed to go get a job. And that was just that was just the way that I thought when I was a kid. I was never really taught anything different. So I actually gave up on that to go get a job at like Buffalo Wild Wings, and then so like between the ages of 16 to 24, I was just trying to like live life and have a job. And it took me quite a while to figure out that I just wasn't good at that. I was fired from every job I ever had. I was fired from Walgreens, Carpool, Food Lion. Like I was fired from everywhere, always. And I really didn't figure out that I was just trying to force my life to go in a direction that didn't fit my personality traits until I was like 24 years old, granted, which is still young. And it's like, I'm very fortunate to have figured it out. But back then it didn't seem like I was young, it seemed like it took me forever, so.
Yes. Some people, don't really realize that until much later in life. You were fortunate enough to figure it out in your 20s. For me, I'm starting to figure that out in my 30s. Everyone is on their own journey, and the more we can cultivate that awareness of what really, is good for us, and, what interests us, and try and follow that spark, we can find more success and more happiness. And, that's great that you were able to find that at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. it's the more time goes on, the more you're able to look back at it and think about how lucky, in a sense, you are. And it's like, I'm not the biggest believer in luck, but it's not bad to have some on your side, and it's just, I never really thought about my skill set or the things that I was, somewhat good at back then as something that would make me a living. I just never thought of it that way. But, full circle back to your question, that is like kind of where marketing began for me, and the idea of like creating something and offering it as a service and then being hired and making money from whatever I was offering to people. And that was kind of where, like, it was kind of a thing that was buried down deep that I didn't rediscover until my mid-20s. But that was, the more that time goes on, the more I think back, like that's really when I guess my, first steps in, creative marketing really began.
Yeah. So let's continue on the journey. So how do you get from making band t-shirts to starting RVA Create, or RVA Social, excuse me?
Yeah, great question. So there was a lot of trips and falls along the way. I mentioned all these jobs and things that I got fired from. So if we skip over that,
Yeah.
I found myself at 24 years old, maybe even 23. It was probably shortly before I turned 24. And I was a bartender in Shockoe Bottom here in Richmond,
Mm-hmm.
just getting by, pretty bad habits, hanging out with, fine people, but people that, they weren't pushing me to be, great or to do anything, extraordinary or to even, develop or take care of myself. It's just,
Right.
typical old, people, forever. You hang out with them, you go and party every weekend. I didn't have a license, didn't have a car, was barely hanging on to my job.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a motorcycle that was my form of transportation. And it had a stolen license plate on it. And that was how I got back and forth. And one night I was leaving the bar after work and I got hit by a drunk driver when I was on my motorcycle. And I didn't have a license, didn't have insurance. So I couldn't call the cops. I couldn't claim, make an insurance claim or anything. So that really put me in a bad situation because now I had no transportation, really had no money. And now I had difficulty getting to work. So I lost
Were you
that
hurt
job.
at all?
I mean, yes, not like severely, I didn't go to the hospital or anything. Like I strained my hamstring really bad and just, scraped up, bruised up, but I was okay.
That's good.
Yeah, I was really lucky. And it was late at night. And there was literally a 16-year-old kid that was just standing nearby that saw the accident. He was like outside smoking a cigarette and he ran up and helped lift this motorcycle off me because it was a full-size bike. It was a Gixxer 1000. It was like a, street bike. And, so ultimately I lost my job because of that, because I couldn't make it to work. I was hurt as it was. I was on crutches. Fortunately, my dad is like in the world of sports medicine. And, he was able to help me, get a set of crutches and just kind of check me out, make sure that I was, healthy and that I was all right. I didn't need to go to the emergency room or something. So that was kind of the first domino. The second one was at the time I was dating this girl. I won't share her name, but, I'd been dating this girl for like 2 or 3 years at that time. So this is like 2013, 2014. And she ended up getting pregnant. And I found out that she was engaged to somebody else other than me.
Wow.
And so I'm forced to realize that, like, spoiler alert, it's not my kid. But if it was, what would I do? Like I was not in any shape to take care of anybody else or be a father or anything like that. So for me at 23, 24 years old, like that was a big like scare. Like I was an idiot, like I was like running around being an idiot, drinking, partying, like hanging out with my friends, just being a dummy. And then here I am forced or faced with the idea that I might be a parent. And that was terrifying. Like that was terrifying.
I bet.
And also simultaneously realizing that my relationship at the time was not what I thought it was. And, I always thought I was cool. Like I thought it was cool. Like, I thought I had a lot of friends and, and I was always, just running around chasing girls, just being a dummy. And I was also faced with the idea that maybe I wasn't as cool as I thought I was. If this girl that I had been with for a couple of years was now leaving me to go be with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's engaged, pregnant with this other person's kid. So now my relationship is over. That's the second domino. The third one is where I was living at the time was in kind of a beat up house with 2 roommates that was attached to the back of a popular restaurant here. And it was all just one building, so in a weird way, we almost like lived in the back of the restaurant, and rent was really cheap. Like my rent was $80 a month. I hardly ever paid it anyway. I lived there for probably almost 3 years. And I think I paid rent maybe like 5 or 6 times. Just because the rent was so low and just the landlord didn't care, like the moneymaker was the restaurant. It wasn't the, bums living in the back of the house,
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really a priority for them, which worked out great for me because I was able to live there for really cheap, live in the city, ride my bike everywhere. And there were good years, but financially and just like, just as a developed person, I was not doing great. And what ended up happening was the restaurant had an inspection from the city. And because the house was part of that property, the house also had to be inspected with the property as well. And the property failed inspection. and they were given notice that the property was going to be deemed condemned if it wasn't renovated. So the restaurant was able to continue running, but the people in the back of the house had to get out, hence being me and my 2 roommates. So we had 30 days to now get out of this house. I mean, it was not in great shape. Like the bathroom was like falling through the ceiling of the building, but we didn't care because the rent was so cheap and it was like a place to sleep. And we were just a bunch of partying idiots anyway. We didn't care.
Yeah, you're basically squatting there.
Yes, exactly. But now at the same time, I'm now learning like, okay, I need to find a place to live. I can't stay here.
Right.
So that's the third domino. And then the last one was, I was coming up on my 24th birthday. I remember my dad came by the house to actually drop off like my birthday gifts for my family. Like we didn't get together. I wasn't on good terms with my family. They weren't exactly proud of me, to say the least. And so I'm realizing at that moment that I don't really have anything to fall back on either. I can't just like go move in with my parents or like, rely on them to, maybe float me some money or something, which even if that were the case, I would be very lucky. We're lucky to like live in America where like that is potentially a possibility. But at that moment, it wasn't for me. So I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, what is my like next step? What am I going to do? So when you ask like, how did I get from where I was before, like high school, making little MySpace layouts, to then, being a bum, getting fired from all these jobs, to somehow starting a business, it almost happened out of necessity. It's like, I think people are faced with a choice. Either they continue to just kind of like fall down that ladder because, for all types of different reasons, they maybe just don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do either, but I just knew I had to figure something out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like when things started for me. And I spent some time thinking like, what am I going to do? And at the time I was like mildly injured and didn't have transportation. So I'm thinking, what can I do to make a living, maybe work from home or something.
Yeah.
And marketing wasn't the first thing I tried. I actually first started, I tried to create like a iPhone repair business, like a little iPhone repair business. And I had a few friends that had like cracked screens on their phone. For whatever reason, they trusted me to fix it, which I didn't. And so like 3 times in a row, I like wrecked somebody's iPhone, and these people were not happy with me. And so that was my very short stint of trying to run an iPhone repair business and learning that I couldn't or didn't know how to do that, or I wasn't very good at it.
At least after the 3rd iPhone, you decided this is not for me.
Yeah. So tried that, didn't work out great. And then I remember talking to my grandmother, and my grandmother remarried late in life to a very successful entrepreneur, and his name was Bob. He ran a medical consulting business, so they helped private practices launch their business in the beginning, get all their financial stuff straight, their operations straight, their equipment and their, facilities, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, man, if I'm going to ask anybody for advice, like it's probably going to be them. They'd traveled the whole world, made millions of dollars. And so I reached out and just kind of asked her for advice. And long story short, I ended up spending a couple weeks in Florida with my grandmother because she had broken her jaw. She had fallen. And it's like, man, I think back and wonder like what would have happened if she didn't fall and get hurt and I never would have went down there, because I spent 2 weeks down there with her, and had no distractions. There's no friends, there's no, partying and drinking. I'm just like hanging out with my grandma, who's like, 80 years old, maybe even older at the time.
And this is about 10 years ago or so, right?
Not even. This is probably 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. So 8 years, maybe. Yeah. 8 years ago. And, so just kind of asking her for advice, and they were consultants. And that was what kind of convinced me to think of the idea of being a freelancer, basically like a freelance consultant in the world of like marketing, design, website type stuff. Because I wasn't quite sure what I was good at yet. But the one thing I was always good at was figuring it out. If somebody hired me to build a website, I'll go figure out how to do that, and that was kind of where things started. I got really lucky in the beginning because I had a friend in high school who I think saw one of my Facebook posts where I mentioned that I was doing, like freelance marketing work, and that I would do work for really cheap in the beginning. Like I just made a post on Facebook saying, hey, if anybody needs help, and I probably made I don't know, I don't even know what it said, but it was probably said, hey, if you need help with your blog or your website or like, MailChimp or something,
Yeah.
let me know. And I had a friend who saw it, and he worked for like a local mom and pop, like landscaping company. And he reached out and said, hey, I have this couple, they are my bosses and they run this landscaping company. They could really use some help. Would you be willing to meet with them and see what you could do? And that was like, I just kind of stumbled into it. It's like I just put it out there, and probably made a few $100, and these people hired me, and I was, whatever they needed help with, I was like, yes, I'll figure it out. I can help you, and charged them super cheap, and then went home and figured out how to do it, And luckily my grandmother let me borrow her laptop, so I didn't even have a laptop. I didn't have, the technology that I have today, nothing even remotely close. I had a Boost mobile phone, like the Obama phone thing that they gave out. I don't know if it was actually Obama phone, but it was like some sort of promotion that Boost Mobile had. It was like, $20 a month, some little crappy phone. And that was all I had. And then my grandmother let me borrow her laptop, and I had to leave it plugged in all the time because the battery wouldn't charge. And so that was what I started with. I just started with what I had and what I could get my hands on. And I would walk to VCU every day and just use the Wi-Fi there because I didn't have internet. I didn't have Wi-Fi. And so I would just walk to VCU and spend my whole day there and just get on YouTube and just pick a new topic every day and say, okay, today I'm going to learn like email autoresponders. Today I'm going to learn blogging. Today I'm going to learn WordPress. Today I'm going to learn, Facebook advertising, whatever. And I just did that every day until I felt like I had a handle on it. Yeah. So that was kind of how I got started, and then to cap it off, I picked up a couple little jobs as a freelancer. And then I started to think to myself, like, do I want to be a freelancer, or do I want to try and position myself as like a company and maybe grow in the future? And so that was where I kind of chose like a path. And, I was much more excited about like being hired as like a real company versus just like being an individual and a freelancer, like a freelance graphic designer. Like that, it wasn't as exciting to me as like really trying to create a company that could really grow to be a little bit bigger. So that was how RVA Social started.
Hey guys, brief pause in the episode to tell you about some of the great businesses that support this podcast. First, we got Weight Train. Use code Evolved Podcast to get 10% off all Weight Train and Athleticity gym gear and apparel. No matter what you need for your workouts, they have the gear to help you get it done. And if you don't see something you want, email them at team@weighttrain.com and they will take your requests for new products. Visit Weight Train for all your gym gear needs. Next is True Nutrition. Use code Evolved Podcast to get 5% off all nutrition supplements. I'm personally a fan of their soy isolate vegan protein powder, available in a variety of flavors and strengths, from light to heavy. They also have non-vegan protein powders if that's not your thing. I personally recommend the cinnamon bun and toasted coconut flavors in the heavy strength, and I add them to waffles, oatmeal, protein shakes, and ice cream. They're delicious. Check out their wide range of supplements at affordable prices that are third-party tested and verified for content quality. They are able to provide such great prices because the supplements come direct from the manufacturer without any marketing gimmicks or fancy labels. Visit TrueNutrition.com to supplement your workouts and your nutrition. Last is Hate Brand Goods. Use code Evolved Podcast to get 15% off all Hate Brand clothing and accessories. Their goat shorts and shirts are the most comfortable clothing I've ever worn, and they have the coolest designs. However, their clothing drops are only available in limited quantities, so get your favorites while you can, and be on the lookout for other drops that you're stoked on. Visit thehate.com, spelled HVIII, for clothing to remind the world that you're not dead yet and you're ready to kick today in the dick. back to the show. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because you wanted to establish that credibility, and usually, if there's a larger organization rather than just one person, you can put more trust in that type of entity. I'm just curious, like, other than your background in doing marketing for bands, like, why did you choose marketing as like the path to follow to achieve the level of success that you wanted?
I don't know if I ever chose it. In around this same time when I was kind of picking up these little freelance things, and maybe even before that, really, around the same time that I had found out that I needed to find a new place to live within like 30, 45 days, I was approached about network marketing, like multi-level marketing, network marketing, like selling lotions, potions, all that type of stuff.
Yeah. Nice.
And, like regardless of what people's thoughts are on that, I've got my thoughts too. And like, I'm a natural skeptic, and, I'm usually not the first to like just believe in whatever and run with it. But if you think about like the timing of what was going on in my life, like I could care less. Like somebody could have been like, "Oh yeah, this is a total scam. You want to do it?" I probably would have been like, "Yeah, I guess so." Like,
Yeah.
like I was desperate. Like I needed to do something to get out of the hole that I was in.
Right.
And so I was approached about the idea of network marketing and like selling energy drinks. And I was like, "Sure, I'll do that. Like I don't care. Like I've got a bunch of friends. Like I'm sure I could sell some energy drinks." So the way that that somehow transitioned into marketing was that I think it helped me identify my strength in sales and just social ability, like being able to speak to people, more importantly, listen to people and understand what it is that they're looking for or what they're in the market for. I feel like I've always been smart, but I just never applied it when I was younger. I feel like I've always understood people really well, and I just never did anything with it. So the weird thing about the whole network marketing thing, which in a funny way, like I was never really that good at it, but it's because I didn't like care about what I was doing. So it
Sure.
was like I took kind of that little spark that I got where I recognized what my strengths were while trying to do this little MLM thing. And then I realized like, oh, like I'm actually good at sales and just talking to people, and I enjoy the act of doing business. Like I enjoy meeting people. I like setting appointments, talking to them, asking questions, getting an understanding of what their, objectives or goals or pain points are, and then figuring out what the solution is. I enjoy doing that. I like being busy, and I also like producing. So I think that was where I identified that I liked that. And at the same time, I recognized that I didn't really care about the effort towards network marketing or any of these stupid products.
Mhm.
So what did I actually care about? And I think that's where I kind of came full circle back to just technology. I love computers, and I was just always really good with technology, and it's an underrated comment because now like everybody's pretty decent at technology because it's so ingrained into our everyday life.
Absolutely.
But when I was younger, it wasn't like that. Like, so everybody just, everyone that knew me, especially my family and just people around me, I think always noticed that I had an inclination for technology specifically. And I also really enjoyed art and music. And somehow when you kind of partner all those things together, maybe not so much the music part, but, in a sense that is creative marketing. I mean, it's just marketing in general. It's how do we take visuals? How do we take audios, partner them with some sort of promotional strategy and turn that into growing something, whether it's selling products or service or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah. I mean, you and I are about the same age. Like I just turned 35 in April. How old are you?
33.
Yeah. So, we've grown up with the internet and all this new emerging technology, that's really shaped our everyday life. From the way it used to be in like the 80s to now we're making TikTok videos and going viral and all this shit,
Yeah.
which I know you have some experience with as well. And it's really cool how you've been able to learn how to use technology over the years and the way that it has evolved to suit your business's needs. I think you've had a really great growth mindset in terms of capturing like the opportunities that you have when you were able to cultivate more awareness about, what it was that you were interested in, and taking bits and pieces from your previous experience working with bands and also working with the MLMs, and how you interact with people to create something that is more original and speaks more authentically to who you are and like what you're about. And I know that you also published a book, right? The Credibility Method.
I did, yeah.
How did that come about?
So I wrote that in it was either 2018 or 2019. So I do a lot of traveling, a lot of speaking on the topic of marketing, due to the fact or due to my success like in the marketing space. But the thing that I noticed after doing all these events is that when I would get off stage, a lot of I would mingle with everybody, hang out with everybody, get to meet, a lot of the attendees and the people that would come and pay to be at these events. And a lot of their questions weren't even related to what I was speaking about on stage. So I'd get on stage and talk about, marketing strategy or social media or content creation or, having a solid website, whatever that might be. But what I would notice is when I would get off stage and talk to some of the people, they would always ask me questions that were more related to my like personal journey and not necessarily about my story, like about me as an individual. There were much more strategic questions. As an example, someone would say, well, hey, like, how did you get to the point where you're speaking on stage? Like, how did that happen? Or how did you get your first client? Like, how did you get somebody to trust you, to hire you, and then pay you to do something? Mm-hmm. It would be questions more like that.
More interpersonal.
Yeah, just more about like my journey to becoming like a business professional almost, or being an established figure in my industry and having people look to me and saying, this person is an expert on this subject matter. How do you get someone to view you as that? And that would be kind of the line of questioning that I would get from people. And I always found those questions really hard to answer because as time goes on and you start to attain more success, you kind of lose touch with what got you there. And I think it's just inevitable because you change and you don't think about those things, right? It's like probably a good example would be when you have no money, it's like all you can think about is like, where is my next paycheck coming from? Where's my next dollar coming from so I can pay the bills? Well, then when you become rich or you become wealthy, you're not thinking about money anymore. So you kind of forget like what it takes to get your hustle on to like make your next paycheck or make the rent just in time because you're just not thinking about it. It's just not part of your activities. It's not part of your day-to-day life. It's just built into what you're doing. So you start to like lose touch with the thoughts that you have, the actions that you take. And that same thing applies to business, and I think moving your way up the ladder of being like a dominant person in your industry, you kind of forget like what it took to work your way there. And I started to notice that was happening to me. And when people would ask me these questions early on, I usually was pretty good at kind of like answering them and telling them what I was thinking at the time and, kind of what I was trying to do to see if it would work. And then as the years went on, I just kind of started to lose touch with that. And so I thought to myself, I should really write all of this down for myself and also to share with others. And that was what provoked me to write the book. And so the topic and the focus of the book is how do you establish yourself as blank, right? Fill in the blank. It could be anything. You could want to be a physical therapist and, you want to be well-known and, work with some of the, maybe top athletes in the world or something or celebrities. Well, how do you go from just being, Mike in his living room or Joe in his living room from Richmond, Virginia, and nobody knows us and we have no credibility, we have no results to show, but this is something we want to do. We're compelled to do it. Where do you start? What do you do? How do you start to kind of build your credibility in your field so that eventually one day you're highly respected in that field and people will pay you what you feel you're worth or more than you feel you're worth. and get people to respect you and hire you for the service you want to offer. So that's the topic of the book. That's why I wrote it. And it's crazy to think it's been, 4 years now since I wrote that book, but that was why I wrote it. And that's what it's all about.
Love that. Yeah. And what sort of feedback have you gotten from people that have read the book?
Yeah. So, kind of a tricky question to answer because, it's hard for me to just rattle off like exact feedback, but I mean, it was an Amazon bestseller during the year that it came out. So it did really well. It's got all pretty much 4 or 5-star reviews on it. And I mean, people tend to like it, like I get tagged all the time on social media from just random people who bought the book on Amazon, people I've never met, and they buy it and apply it to their life. It's not a heavy read either. You can read it in 30, 45 minutes, under an hour. The book is barely 100 pages, and it's not so much about me. It's more, like my story is loosely weaved into the book because it's hard to explain the principles that I'm trying to teach in the book without talking about myself a little bit. But
Sure.
it's mostly focused on like actual actions and steps that people should take to try to build their credibility and try to position themselves the way that they want in their field. But the feedback has been good. So I'd like to think that it's helpful for people. And yeah, I might write another one here in the next couple of years. We'll see. It's something that's been on my mind and probably something. I mean, I'll definitely write another book at some point.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping to maybe start on one here in the next year or two.
Yeah. I was wondering if you had a follow-up planned, an updated version, more related to the current circumstances we're in, how to become a viral TikTok influencer, something along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, TikTok probably existed, but it definitely wasn't relevant in my life when I wrote that book,
Right.
Yeah. And I wrote that book. It was almost like just getting the one out of the way. It was something I'd never done before. I didn't know where to start. And I am a good writer, but it's not like I'm like some well-known published author. It's like maybe a little bit now, but it's not really why people know me. It's more they know me for who I am, and the book is more of just an ancillary thing on top of that.
Yeah. Did you self-publish that on Amazon?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, the main takeaway on that for me is that you had an idea and you applied it. Like you took the action and you put it out there. Of course, you admit you're not a great writer, but that's not the point. Like you shared something that you thought other people would find valuable, as a way to, share your value and add to your credibility as well.
Yeah, and I fight this every day as a bit of a perfectionist. It's hard to not, and I think artists probably struggle with that. And I don't necessarily know that I would call myself an artist, but I'm an art. I'm an advocate of art.
Yeah.
And I like creativity. And I mostly like I think of myself as a designer, not really an artist. And they're both probably very similar, but I am much more passionate about the idea of design. And that could apply to architecture. It could apply to interior design. It could apply to colors and fashion and clothing and things like that. But most importantly, it applies like when I think of design and the way that I do work, I think of websites. I think of websites and social media. It's the majority of what we do. And it's what we're known for as a company. But like I tend to be a perfectionist and I try to fight that because to your point, I do believe that done is better than perfect. So I try to like stick with that throughout everything I do is, don't wait to write the perfect book. Just write a book and get it done to prove that you can do it, because you can always change it or adjust it before you publish it. It's like get it to the point where it's done and just do it.
Right.
And I think that holds a lot of people back is they think they need to wait for the perfect circumstances or the perfect scenario before they do something. And that just isn't true,
Yeah, I tell myself that frequently. Finish is better than perfect. I definitely relate to the feeling of, not wanting to do something before I'm ready, or like, maybe I need to like make more tweaks to this podcast episode before I call it finished. But, I am trying to put out the best product there as possible, but also not getting too stuck in the weeds that, nothing is moving forward. And also, it's like any type of exercise you do, you've got to put in the reps, you got to, do the motions, so you can learn from them and do better next time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So zooming back out and looking at the big picture, what would you say is your why for doing the work you do in marketing?
A big part of it is, I think that business owners and entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call them, somebody, anybody who's trying to drive their own ship, whether it's a business, whether it's a passion, whether they want to become, a celebrity or, successful music art, like whatever that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are misled when it comes to being successful, and especially when it comes to using technology and something like the internet as the driving factor to do that. And real estate's a really good example. If we think about the average real estate agent, first of all, almost all of them fail. And what a lot of people don't know is that this is true for almost all businesses. Like over 95% of all businesses fail within 10 years. And people don't know this. Like people literally just aren't aware of that. And if you think about that statistic, like that's mind blowing. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Almost all businesses that really succeed fail by the third generation. And this is even like the big businesses, think about Hanes, think about Sears, think about Kmart, think about Circuit City. Like if we rewind to when we were kids, these are like very well-known successful brands and companies that are either non-existent today or barely hanging on and liquidating, after bankruptcy.
Right.
So when you look at it that way, you wonder, why does that happen? And I think it's because businesses failed to adapt. They failed to stay relevant. They failed to change with the times. They failed to avoid becoming outdated and old and boring. And the solution to all of that is marketing. And for whatever reason, this is probably the one question I don't have the answer to. I just have always felt like a natural understanding of marketing and like what works. I think a big part of that is always admitting that like you don't know everything. You could even argue that we don't know anything, and you have to kind of have that outlook on marketing because it changes so frequently. We just gave the example of like, I wrote my book in 2018 or 19 and like TikTok was not relevant. And then you snap your fingers 2 years later, it's the most downloaded app on the planet, and even me, like I was slightly caught off guard by that. But I jumped onto TikTok at the end of 2019 thinking I was late, right? Thinking I was late to the party. And it's like, in the grand scheme of things, I was one of the first ones to the party,
just getting started.
Yeah. So, and I didn't figure that all out on my own. I think this speaks to looking for opportunity, listening for opportunity, being open to being wrong, and just trying to continue to learn about your craft, regardless of how good you are. Like I made my first 6 figures in 2016, and I could have easily let that trick me into thinking that like I was hot shit or something,
Sure.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, I did feel that way a little bit, and you live and learn, and, you kind of, you think you're awesome and you think you're a baller until you find out that you're not, and there's always a next level.
Yeah.
And the details are within being able to continue to advance levels, even if you think you're at the top. So just learning from others and just looking out and keeping your ears open for opportunities. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't even remember the question, but that, just being aware, being adaptable.
Yeah. Well, you answered it. Do you have any mentors that, help you learn and continue to push you outside of your comfort zone?
Yes and no. I've never had any like real physical mentors, somebody that I could call or meet with for coffee or anything. And I know other people that are my age and in my industry, and it feels like they move so much faster than I did back then, and just had resources that I didn't have. But I feel like it's made me a much stronger business person in the long term, um, because it goes both ways. It's like, obviously having a mentor is an amazing thing. And there's been times where it's like I was desperate to have a mentor, but it's like, that having a mentor, I feel like, is something that just has to naturally happen. And no doubt you can pursue a mentor, but
sure.
that's easier said than done. It's like not an easy thing to figure out. So I've never had any like real one-on-one mentors, but I have a lot of virtual mentors. And what I mean by that is like, probably the best example is like, if I could spend a day with like one person, one business person specifically, yeah, it would probably be Marcus Lemonis. And Marcus is the CEO of Camping World. He's also the host of a TV show called The Profit. And the guy's a billionaire, and he owns probably 200, 250, 300 businesses at this point. He's got a huge portfolio. He also has like a capital fund, and guy's awesome. And, in pursuing education and getting better at what I do as a business person, as a marketing person, I find, and again, not so much anymore, but when I was trying to like get somewhere, when I was trying to make it, I often found myself referencing him, and watching this TV show. I mean, and I recommend it to anybody. Like, I never went to college, never went to school for any of this. I'm self-taught and figured it all out, in my spare time on my own, just trying to figure it out. But I definitely spent a lot of time like watching The Profit and learning about business, learning about inventory management, learning about financial management, learning about, revenue per square foot in a retail space, like all these things that I would have never learned otherwise. Maybe I would have learned them, but I learned them from him. And so, yeah, haven't had any physical mentors, but definitely some really great, content creators and educational people out there. My favorite is hands down Marcus Lemonis.
Have you talked to him directly, or have you just been watching his videos?
Yeah, so I did actually have the chance to meet him, and that was probably 2016. So I was probably, giving my all in this marketing stuff for about 2 years, and then I went to a conference. I think it was in San Diego, maybe. I can't remember. It was somewhere out west, and he was the keynote speaker there. And I paid to be, like a VIP attendee and have the chance to meet him. And so I did. I got to meet him and took a photo with him and stuff. I just told him like, hey, watched every episode, and like, you've been a big inspiration. And that was kind of it, But I did have the chance to meet him and just have a quick like couple-minute conversation.
Sweet. Well, yeah, definitely sounds like you picked up a lot of great info from him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really cool you got to meet him as well. Yeah, hopefully he lived up to the hype.
Yeah, he's great, man. I mean, he's a killer dude. Good advice, crazy life story. I mean, really, really wild success story.
Yeah. Well, what projects are you working on right now or recently finished?
Yeah, good question. So potentially Brawlers is being acquired, meaning we might actually sell the business, which is interesting. So we're kind of in the middle of negotiations on that to see if this group would like to purchase the business. So that's bittersweet, like it's exciting to, build something and, maybe hand it off to people who could take it to the next level or give it more attention, because my priority is marketing, and Brawlers has always been kind of a passion project, side project. And so to be able to hand it off to somebody who can maybe make it their main priority and put their all into it and turn it into, something that maybe, we could have never done on our own, that's exciting. But at the same time, it's kind of sad to let it go. And, but yeah, so that, all in all, that's exciting, good things. And then as far as marketing goes, looking ahead to what I would call Web 3.0 and understanding how to adapt the world of marketing and specifically websites in the world of Web 3.0, and when things are much more digital and there are things going on such as NFTs and stuff like that. So that's kind of on our radar. It's not something that we're head down every day going crazy on, but as we transition into next year, preparing to start offering services like around the concepts that Web 3.0 provide.
Awesome. And do you know if you plan to stay in the MMA industry if you guys end up selling brawlers?
It's a good question. I mean, it's a big part of my life regardless, like to be an MMA fan, you probably spend, if you're doing it, by the book and you're not streaming it illegally, it costs like $1,000, $1,200 a year to just be a fan of the fights, to watch the pay-per-views, to watch all the fight nights, watch all those fights and everything, plus Fight Pass. Like, it's an expensive sport to be a fan of. But I've followed it for a very long time and I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's a big part of my life. It's like watching the fights, whether it's by myself or with my brothers, my family. My dad is in the United States Wrestling Hall of Fame. He grew up his entire life as a really, really talented wrestler. He's traveled with the Olympic wrestling team, the United States wrestling team. So that's where like me and my brothers and my family, like we get that bug for the sport so heavily. So, I mean, it'll be a part of my life probably till the day I die. As far as like the business side of it, I don't know, maybe it's hard to say. Definitely a lot of lessons learned from being a part of it. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what the future brings.
Have you done any MMA training yourself?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a little bit. I mean, like I started wrestling at the age of 6, and I think my brother started when he was 4, and we did that all the way throughout high school, and went to all the state tournaments, national tournaments. And we traveled all over the country for the sport of wrestling. And then, I do a lot of boxing and kickboxing just personally in my spare time. And I've done a little bit of jujitsu. One thing that people don't know me is that I've got a pretty rare like skin sensitivity, like skin condition that I was born with. And so, basically just like a more advanced version of like sensitive skin. So I get like cut up and scraped up like pretty easily. So jujitsu and like all the friction from wrestling around is not always the greatest. So I don't do much of that, but I do enjoy boxing and kickboxing and stuff like that. And I've got a whole setup here at my house, and so I'll train and work out and stuff. And it's a big part of like my exercise like routine. So a little bit, yeah.
Does wearing a rash guard help at all?
I mean, yeah, a little bit. And the funny thing is like that's not even really what affects me. It's mostly like elbows and knees and like especially my shins and like my knuckles and stuff, man. Like yeah, just get beat up like quite a bit.
All right. Well, what do you do for your workout routine in addition to that?
Yeah, good question. So I really enjoy like mobility type stuff, like I've never been like a really bulky, like strong dude, like especially like as a wrestler, you start to learn more about endurance and just lean strength because you always have to make weight and stuff like that. So I've never really had a goal or been interested in being like a big, like muscly dude. It's more or so, like I would say 80% of like my health regimen is just through eating healthy, like I drink water, coffee, and that's it, and of course a little bit of alcohol every now and then,
Mm-hmm.
And just eating healthy, just staying away from breads and sugars and candies and stuff like that. And then when it comes to workout, that's like the other 20%, so I'm not like, I'll work out a couple times a week, sometimes once a week, sometimes once every other week.
Right.
I do what I feel. I do what my body communicates to me and, base it on how I feel. But I do really enjoy like kettlebell workouts and cycling. And then of course, boxing and kickboxing. Those are like the 3 things that are kind of like my go-to.
Yeah, I know you're a big mountain biker and occasionally road biker, right?
Yeah, it's probably the opposite actually.
Okay.
I probably enjoy road biking most. And mountain biking I got into because of Alex, who works for Stoqd, and he's kind of like my right-hand man. He actually got me into mountain biking. And so it was more so just out of necessity from him being in town. And if he's going to go ride the trails, well, I need a mountain bike so I can go with him. And so he convinced me to get a mountain bike and go and start riding. And I really enjoy it. I'm a big fan of like motorsport too, and just like racing, like car racing. And funny enough, like mountain biking has a lot of similarities to how you approach racing a car in a sense, as far as hitting the trails and hitting turns and apexes at certain angles and stuff. And I love that type of stuff. It's super interesting.
Yeah. Have you done any motorcycle racing?
No. And since my experience on my motorcycle back in 2014. Pretty much since then, man, I kind of was done with motorcycles. I have an uncle who passed away in a motorcycle accident. And I was like, all right, well, you know what? Not worth the risk, not some, they're fun. I've ridden motorcycles like in my early 20s, and they are a lot of fun, but they're super dangerous. Cars are dangerous too, but
right.
I just feel like my goal has been to try to create a valuable life, and motorcycles are just one of those things that I kind of crossed off the list and said, all right, this is one risk that I don't think I'm going to take. So no, I've never done any racing on a motorcycle or anything like that.
That's cool. I mean, you traded in the motorcycle for the road bike. I think that's a pretty good idea there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What does your morning routine look like each day?
Yeah, so it's fairly flexible. I get up between like probably 7:45, 8:30, something like that. The first couple hours of my day are pretty crucial. And a lot of the times I'll stay at home and work from home for the first couple hours. I'll do my best to avoid my phone. I don't do things like checking email and stuff in the morning. So I avoid anything that can like pull my day in the direction that someone else needs. So somebody's saying, hey, following up on this, I need this, or, whatever. I wait to do those things until I've done my most important tasks first, so I also, and speaking of working out, like I, for whatever reason, just enjoy working out in the evening. I don't really enjoy working out first thing in the morning. I think the way that my mind works, I just start thinking about work pretty much right away. And I'm better at just tackling the things that I don't want to do first thing in the beginning of the day and doing the things that I want to do in the evenings. I think I enjoy evenings more. And I think my like mental capacity is more effective during the morning and during the day. But yeah. So first couple hours is always focused on doing like the one or two things that I really don't want to do. So I try to break down my tasks and my projects. That's probably a whole nother topic. Like productivity and project management is like something I could talk about forever. But based on what is on my agenda and what is planned for that day, I'll pick the one or two things that are the biggest pain that I don't want to do and do those first. And then that way, once I'm done with that, everything else is easy. Everything else throughout your entire day is just a bonus because you already did the things that you didn't want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in a creative slump, what do you try to do to get out of it?
It's a good question. A lot of it is kind of like health related in a way. Trying to force yourself to do the one thing that you don't want to do. And that could be going for a walk. Like doing like a cold plunge or like cold showers is something that like helps me just kind of reset, and that like those are things that you don't want to do. Like being freezing cold isn't desirable really,
The body doesn't want it.
Yeah. It's like, and I do like the cold, but I'd be lying if I said it's the most comfortable thing in the world to like take a freezing cold shower. But I do find that it's a pretty crucial like reset. And I think creative slumps a lot of the times have to do with just your overall mood, like being down on yourself or just feeling like you have some sort of block on your creativity. I think it has a lot to do with just, whatever your personal mood or feeling is at the time. Because you end up just getting stuck in your own head. So it's all about like mental clarity, And so what are the things that can create mental clarity? And a lot of the times it's maybe getting away from your block, maybe not working for a couple of days. And, not everybody has the leisure of being able to do that, but, going for a walk or going and doing a cold plunge or a cold shower. Another thing that I think is pretty cool is sensory deprivation, like going into a float tank, which is actually pretty affordable too. It's something that most people could probably give a shot, and just clearing your head and just trying to reset, not putting, learning to not put so much pressure on yourself and just going with the flow. Like if it's going to take somebody time to get over a creative block, then take that time to yourself to just reset. The more pressure you put on yourself and the more you try to force it to happen and force it to work, the longer you're probably going to prolong that period of feeling like you can't get over that creative slump. So yeah, I think it all has to do with mental clarity and eating healthy, drink water, just do the hard things that you don't want to do. And I think people will find that the thing that they're trying to force will just come naturally if you just make the personal discipline decisions that you know you need to make.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, good food and good water can go a long way.
Yeah, for sure.
And as far as the, sensory deprivation float tanks, I've done that once before. I was sort of in my head about the whole experience. So I would definitely like to do it again now that I at least have, that experience under my belt. I feel like I could probably enjoy it more.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a great meditator, so we probably have that in common. Like I'm not good at meditation. That's actually why I like the float tank, is like you can kind of sit in there and it's a little bit more helpful because it's dark and you don't really feel your extremities so much, as if I was like, if I'm sitting, with my legs crossed like this, it's like you're thinking about things because you can feel your hands and your arms and you get distracted. And so it is helpful a little bit, but yeah, I'm not great at meditation either.
Yeah. Do you have any habits that you practice that help you to stay productive, remember new ideas, or add value to your life? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, definitely. So this is another one where over time I've, created this, leisure in my life. But I use technology as like my number one weapon of productivity, so I'm already like a very organized person. And I think if somebody is unorganized, I think that's what they should tackle first. It's like if you're going to be, most successful people are organized, whether it's organized mentally or organized physically. I like to think that I'm both. I compartmentalize my thoughts quite a bit, but I use what's at my disposal. And for most people, I mean, just start with your phone. And so like I use the reminders app on Apple all the time. It's like if I run out of paper towels, like I'm using my phone to add paper towels to the shopping list. If I run out of coffee, like I right then and there, when that happens, I'm telling my phone to remind me and add this to my list. So using technology to my benefit, I also use Apple HomeKit quite a bit. So just setting up sequences and reminders and automations that make my life easier so that I don't have to think about productivity so much. It's just built into the way that I do things. But the biggest thing is just when you think about something, do it at the moment you think about it. Don't be the person that thinks about like, oh, I need to do my laundry, so maybe I'll do that like this weekend. In reality, how long does it take to like put your clothes in a bundle and throw them in the washing machine? Like not that long. And people feel like they don't have time to do stuff like that. But if you treated everything like that in your life, you would start to realize that you only feel that way in the moment because you're not treating everything else that way too. If you treat everything else like that, your life starts to flow a little bit more smoothly. And all of a sudden, you fast forward 6 months and you're like, wow, I'm way more productive than I was when I was just procrastinating. And I think people maybe don't think about something like that as procrastinating, like, oh, I'm not going to do my laundry like right now because I'm busy, or, it's a weekday, or I got to get ready for work tomorrow, or whatever that is. I'll do it this weekend. Well, it's like, well, our time is set. Like you and I don't have any difference in the amount of time we have. So It's like, if you think about it that way, you almost end up feeling stupid because you're like, well, I'm just taking this time slot and I'm not saving time. I'm just moving it to a different time slot. It's like, it's the same amount of time. You're just choosing to do it or not do it. And so everyone's pushing all these tasks to the end. And then it's like, you're entering into that time period where all these tasks have built up, and then you never get out of it. You never dig yourself out. And then your life becomes a reoccurring week that just has a bunch of shit piled up in it all the time. So it's like, you have to eventually break that cycle and just make the decision to do the hard thing, so
Exactly.
But I use technology to help me remember to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I do pretty much the same thing. Someone asked me last week, what's the most used app on my phone? And I told them it was my calendar, just because like I have to put everything in there that I need to get done. And I have recurring reminders like to go walk my dog, or, take some medicine that I need to do, or like basically anything that I need to, schedule out or have advanced awareness of. That's the place to do it. And
Definitely.
That helps me to stay productive and stay on task. Also, I think it's really great that you can put those systems in place. So it's one less thing for you to think about, it saves so much more mental clarity that you were speaking to earlier. And it also makes me think of, I do a lot of meal prepping, right? So, you know, when you think of like the time it takes to prepare your meals, like you're not saving any time necessarily, but you're doing more on the front end to create more time on the back end. So you don't have to prepare meals throughout the rest of the week because you already have that taken care of.
Yeah, 100%. I order freshly, so it's similar. Like I'm not prepping my own meals, I just order them.
Right.
But it's all organic, gluten-free, and like it makes my life a million times easier. And I've been ordering them for like probably 3 years now, and it's like, yeah, it's hard to beat, whether you're doing it yourself all at one time or finding someone else to do it or finding a company that provides, pre-prepared
Right.
meals. It saves a ton of time. And I feel the same about having like a cleaning crew, and it's like, again, not everybody has that leisure, but I think it's one of the first, when you start to become successful, I think it's one of the first things you should splurge on is having someone clean the place that you live in. Start with, once a month and then build up from there, because it's like the environment that you live in is what creates your mood every day, and if you're waking up, in a pigsty and it's messy and it's dirty and it's dusty and it's dark, like that determines your mood. So that's another thing too, that kind of fuels productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to move towards wrapping up, but I have a few more questions I want to ask.
Sure.
How do you practice self-care in your life to give yourself the energy that you need so you can focus on your personal growth?
Yeah, so in a way, it's kind of related to what I was just talking about. I think putting the time into being in an environment that makes you happy, and that helps, when you're having an off day, or you're in your head, or you feel unproductive, or you're in like a creative slump, like we talked about, trying to put time into creating a space that you love, and it might not be your whole house, you know, maybe,
Yeah.
Maybe somebody's not at liberty to, put holes in their wall and do all this stuff, but it's like, start with small things, maybe it's, you know, upgrading your pillows and your blankets and your bed to have better sleep. It's like, that's how self-care starts. It's not like having a spa day or doing a face mask. It's like, those things are cool, but it's like, how do you improve your quality of life? So I think people should take inventory of what's in their life, and these are kind of, in a way, material things, not materialistic things, but just material things, such as your bed, such as the carpet in your house, such as the lighting, and the light bulbs in your house, just things that make you feel good or more comfortable, more relaxed, more in your zone. And it's like, it's so easy to overlook that stuff, but it's like, you're kind of creating a crutch for when you're not having a bad day. It's just one more thing that makes it that much easier to focus on yourself and treat yourself the way that you see yourself. It helps you feel confident about your environment, who you are, the way that you feel about yourself, the way that you carry yourself. So yeah, I think, in one word, just your environment. The environment that you spend your time in most is critical, when it comes to self-care. And if your environment is good, the idea is that it'll put you in a better mood to be able to take care of yourself in other ways, motivate you to go out and work out or eat better, or, just go to sleep earlier, wake up earlier, whatever that might be.
Right. And that includes not just the surroundings, but the people who you surround yourself with as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's probably more important.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of people, I want to move on to some recurring segments in our podcast. First is PMA Warrior of the Week. Who is someone who inspires you to keep a positive mental attitude?
Yeah, so, I'll try not to ramble on this one, because another sport, I mentioned motorsport and car racing. One of probably the greatest drivers of all time is Lewis Hamilton. Guy's a 7-time world champion, and he's a Formula One race car driver.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the only Black driver in the sport. in a sport that is dominated by, old European white men, rich white guys, and the guys had so much like hardship and obstacles like thrown in his way. And it's just, since if anybody's not familiar with him, definitely look him up and just follow him on social media. You don't even need to be a fan of the sport. I mean, the guy's just unbelievable. Very selfless, like puts everyone else first, really pushes, equality and diversity, and trying to get other represented minorities into Formula One, which is just, it's amazing. He pushes for women engineers and women drivers, and even outside of women, just other minorities being represented as engineers. And it's crazy because like he's fighting for other people's obstacles and inequalities when he himself has had some of the most challenging hate thrown at him and obstacles. And it's insane because, I mean, he's literally the most credentialed person in the sport. And there's so many other people that, you could compare in a way, whether it's Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, some of these people that are, in like just a whole different category of athlete. It's just insane. And my go-to is athletes. It's funny because I don't like the typical sports like baseball, basketball, football, like they're interesting, but the two that I go to is motorsport and mixed martial arts. And those are like the two things that I love, that I follow, that I care about. And Lewis Hamilton's awesome. He also released a masterclass, like on masterclass.com, that's like really great. And it's actually about like having a winning attitude. It's amazing. So anybody who hasn't heard of him or isn't familiar with him, definitely check him out. But yeah, I'd say probably Lewis Hamilton for sure.
Cool. Next is our mindset moment. What is a quote or tip you use that inspires you to keep going and stay positive despite personal hardships?
That's a tough one. It's like I read this chapter in an autobiography or a biography. It was written by Walter Isaacson. So it's like someone else wrote about him. So whichever one that is, autobiography, biography. And it's this chapter called Reality Distortion Field. And that's the title of the chapter. And it basically was talking about how Steve Jobs was almost like arrogant in his belief to accomplish the thing in front of him. It's like people thought he was insane. Like people thought he was literally just crazy. Right. And, I would never like compare myself to Steve Jobs, but I did resonate with that chapter quite a bit because I feel like that's been a really strong characteristic that I've grown and gotten good at over the years, is filtering out the noise, being confident about your path moving forward, and just ignoring everything else, almost to the point where you're like naive, Mm-hmm. And that can come with repercussions. It doesn't always work out. Like you don't want to have a pattern of being naive, but you also don't want to just listen to what everyone else has to say and get stuck in your own thoughts and be a pessimist, Yeah. So I think the way that I continue to like feel my best is just almost being like pig-headed towards the idea of success. Just almost believing in it to the point where it could be considered arrogance, like I will not accept anything less than what I want. And it's hard to just exercise that. You can't just like be like, oh, well, I'm going to do that too now. It's definitely something you have to learn and convince yourself to do and embody and actively pursue feeling that way. Mm-hmm. But as far as advice, maybe that would be a little bit more actionable. Is I tend to think of individuals, like I have this kind of analogy that I came up with years ago, whereas like your life is almost like a speaker, like think about like an audio speaker, like a Bluetooth speaker, and it's like that speaker plays music, right? But it's only going to play based on the quality of what you connect to it or plug into it, so like if you plug in, some outdated, Walkman, some old, crappy piece of technology, you plug it into that speaker, like the audio quality is going to represent what's being plugged into it. So if we think of ourselves and our lives and our physical body and our, mental health as this speaker, you kind of have to question, like, what am I plugging into it? Is it junk food? Is it video games? Is it my negative friends and family? Like, are these the things that I'm plugging into my life? Because if it is, everything that comes out of my life and that is produced from me is going to reflect what the input is. It's like input equals output. So I always just try to remind myself of that. And if you can put it in simple terms like that, you can't avoid forcing yourself to try to be good to yourself and be positive and, treat yourself your best, because like knowledge is a weapon. It's like, once you know something, you can't like unlearn it. So when it becomes that obvious, it's like, okay, well, I can't treat myself like this. I can't spend my time around these people, and I can't keep eating Cheetos every day, because I know that this is not helping me move towards my goals and being the best version of myself.
Yeah.
Even though I do love Flamin' Hot Cheetos.
And that does transition well to our last segment, which is good food, good mood. What is one of your go-to meals that helps you to feel your best?
Man, that is very tough, because like I love pasta. Like I love pasta. Doesn't necessarily make me feel my best, but I do eat a lot of like gluten-free pasta and just avoiding breads and sugars for sure. But I like zucchini, man. I really like zucchini. That's a good one. Like roasted zucchini with like some ricotta and like garlic is really, really good. And it's light and enjoyable. So that's a really good meal. And also just a really good hamburger. It's like, if you overeat a hamburger, you definitely feel like crap. But man, I'm a sucker for a good hamburger. Are you plant-based? Are you vegan or vegetarian?
Yeah, I've been vegan
I remember that.
since 2017.
Yeah, that's amazing. Good for you, man. Congrats.
Yeah, I definitely feel so much better compared to what I remember feeling like, 5 to 6 years ago, coming up on 6 years now. And, I've been on my own weight loss journey too. I've lost a lot of weight.
I remember that.
Vegan.
Yeah.
And, I've tried to eat more protein and, take better care of myself, be more mindful about the calories that I'm consuming, because just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's healthy.
Yeah.
But, that's a process in and of itself.
Well, I commend you for it, man. I know it's not an easy thing to do. I love grapefruit. That's probably the last thing I'll say. I really enjoy grapefruit.
Grapefruit is pretty good.
Yeah.
I can't really tolerate grapefruit juice too much, like by itself, because it's a little bitter.
Yeah.
But I do like the flavor. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks again, Myke. It was great talking to you. I really enjoyed our conversation. Where can people connect with you if they want to follow along with you in your journey?
Yeah, so pretty much just at Myke Metzger, just at my name. You can pretty much find me wherever. You can also find my website and all, resources that are related to me. Just if you Google my name, pretty much everything's on there. Website, company website, all that good stuff. And yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me. I enjoyed our conversation, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care, bud.
Likewise.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out our podcast. I hope you got a lot out of it and it was helpful for you in your personal growth journey. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please do so on your preferred podcast provider. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Stay blessed and keep the PMA. Later.